Don't look. The holidays are thought of as a time of joy and relaxation. But there are those times when they're anything but joyous. We'll discuss those times on Talking with Henrietta, coming up next. Hi, I'm Henrietta. Welcome to the show. We usually think of the holidays as a time for celebration, vacation, family get togethers, and a time that takes us away from our daily routines. But did you know that holidays, national observances, unsettling news events, and dreary weather are times when suicide hotlines get some of their most calls? For example, one crisis hotline in St. Louis reported that it received 600 calls on Valentine's Day, rather than its usual 400 calls per day. This past November, crisis hotlines were overwhelmed after news of Donald Trump's election victory. So, what can we do when holidays, unexpected news events, and those dreary days of fall and winter increase our thoughts of sadness and despair? My two guests today will give us some answers on how we can get through those days. On my left is Dr. Uba Bocheva, the Director of Research and Strategic Projects at the Mental Health Association of San Francisco. Dr. Bocheva is an experienced trainer, consultant, and researcher in the area of mental health and wellness. Dr. Gloria Horsley is seated on my right. Dr. Horsley is a past faculty member of the University of Rochester, a bereaved parent and founder of Open to Hope, a much visited grief recovery website with the mission of helping people find hope after loss. She is a published author, radio and television host, and blogger for the Huffington Post and Forbes. Well, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
I should say, talking about joy, it's a joy to have you here. So, should we ban holidays, national observances, unsettling news events? That would really be a stretch, wouldn't it?
It would be, and actually, Henrietta, those holidays and events can have some negative downsides, but they're also things that keep us going in life. Some things that we're looking forward to, some things that are not. But it brings up our emotions, and it makes us look forward to things, and it makes us feel, and it makes us think, and sometimes it makes us sad, but it also can bring joy.
Sure. Now, saying that holidays gives us something to look forward to, given that they do, what happens? Why do people, what is it within the nature of holidays that causes depression and sadness?
I think that it's all about the human nature in terms of our expectations and what we want to get out there in life. So very often we create a stress for us. And speaking from my Bulgarian perspective, or a person that I've been for 20 years here, but I remember when I just came and during Christmas, and I was extremely surprised that for all these people, Christmas around me was present. And because for us, Christmas was being with family and really sharing the joy. And I remember we went to Walgreens to buy something in the evening, and everybody was saying, oh, late shoppers. I had no idea what they meant. And then all over the years, I realized how commercialized, for example, holidays can be. And so I think that this can be one of the stresses that I put in the checkbox, that it's avoidable stress. Because there are stresses that are avoidable, stresses that are unavoidable, as tragic events or big loss, for example, but a lot of the stresses might be avoidable. And of course, then there is a joyful stress.
Yes.
And
Now,
if we want, we can create a
our
joyful stress
stress.
during holiday.
Okay, so let's talk about the unavoidable stress, although it was Dr. Bocheva that mentioned it. Can you think of what for you would unavoidable stress be?
Well, I think for myself, my son died many years ago, and one of the stressors, I work with a lot of bereaved parents and family members, people who have lost spouses, and one of the stressors for them is the unknown, particularly in those early years. They're not sure. How are they going to face it? Are they going to be able to open the ornaments? You know, are they going to keep them closed?
Would this be the holiday of the death or just a holiday in general?
It could be a holiday of the death, the anniversary reaction, but it also is just these holidays coming up. Maybe the first one, the second one, even the third one, you know, can be difficult to decide what you're going to do on Hanukkah or whatever, which parties you're going to go to. And the fear of will you break down, particularly early. I hear a lot of people talking about fear, and I never thought about fear as being a connection. But I was at a meeting with bereaved parents, the Compassionate Friends, only a couple of weeks ago, and several of the people who are newly bereaved said that they were afraid.
That's interesting. Is fear? Now, you had talked about unavoidable stress. Is fear, how would you rank fear in terms of?
Fear is one of the basic emotions, and very often we might experience anger or anxiety, and in the end of the day, it might be fear, and especially, and I'm speculating here, but if it is a fear about, if it is related to big loss of loved ones, it's really about control in this case. It's fear about whether you can control your emotions in this situation or not.
Yeah.
From what I understand.
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
You know, whether you're going to be able to stay in control during the holiday, and you just don't know.
So it makes me wonder, when we talk about depression and we talk about sadness, it seems that control might be a part of all of that. I mean, we can control how we want to feel. But then, is that control a good thing? You know, some would say, you feel it, go through it. And the more you can feel it and go through it, the better it gets in the long term.
Yeah, I think that go through it is the thing. I think there are many people who are stuck, and they can't move through it, and probably need some help. And you know, there's normal grief and loss, and then there's being stuck in it. So I think, you know, if you can go through it, and it's tough, it's work.
It's all work, I find. Now, the unavoidable stress, and we'll say more about the control of the emotions and all. But when you talk about unavoidable stress, if you're in a situation where the media says it's a time for gift giving, and your children are expecting to get gifts, how do you avoid that type of stress that you might feel with the pressure to get and give gifts?
By asking yourself, is it unavoidable or avoidable? And what you can do about it. We often talk about these 4 A's, dealing about stress, but the one is whether you can avoid it. What is really stressing you? Is it stressing you that you cannot give the right presents for the, just ask your question, why you think that it's unavoidable not to go and have exactly the list that your kids gave you for Christmas, or to give presents to 20 people or others. So to see what is the part in which you can have control and decide that maybe you might either avoid or alter your reaction.
How do you avoid it if you have 20 people who might be expecting gifts that you know are going to give gifts to you?
Yeah, then you can then you can say, oh, this is my choice. I decided to have 20 gifts, and let alter my reaction. Instead of stressing, let's decide that I would be joyful this, and we talk about wellness too. So let's decide how I can prevent to freak out about the whole process of getting these gifts. So maybe I can do something that I can start shopping ahead of time, or which a lot of people, yeah, or do it online, or decide that I can do something different in a way so that I can not be
Well, do you
stressed.
know
Yeah,
that sounds so rational?
it might be.
I,
And we're dealing
Yeah,
with emotions, right?
yeah,
So,
but this is how
so
you, yeah.
do we use our logic to control our emotions?
well, I think that there's a practical aspect here. If you if you can't do it this year, I think that remember in school when you got a hall pass? Well, I think you give yourself a hall pass. I
Ah,
think you say, I can't do it this year. And you tell
oh,
people that you can't, but if you have to do some of the things, then you get people to help you. You ask family members to shop with the kids. You ask family members to take them to Santa Claus if you can't do it this year.
well, I'm thinking that takes a lot of inner strength. First of all, to admit that you can't do it to yourself, and then to face other people to say, I can't do this.
Mhm.
You know, and that might be beyond, do you think, what some people can do? I mean, they might think of the humiliation of it, having to admit, I can't do it.
Well, maybe I heard Oprah once say this. She was on with a woman who said that her husband was beating her, and she said, I want you to tell him that Oprah says no more.
Oh,
And maybe Henrietta should say,
No.
get help.
to the people who say,
Give,
I can't do it.
yeah, give him permission. I heard Henrietta today, and she said, get help. I don't need to do it. I don't
Well,
have
if
to
you
have
ask
everything.
me, I would always tell people to listen to their inner feelings and to act on their inner feelings. Now, that takes a lot of courage
Oh
to
yeah,
do,
yeah,
especially what you haven't done in the past, in a
yeah.
way that you haven't done it.
Yeah, you should. Actually, the hardest part is to start to be aware about your feelings, because very often we just I think that we lie to ourselves much more often than we lie to others about our feelings,
Ah,
because it is hard. There are a lot of defense and stuff like that. So that's why there is some kind of a, I mentioned these wellness tools that you can have. Actually, and I don't like the word tools because it might look very logical to everybody, or it can be things that just ask yourself, what, what are the times when I really feel good, when I feel well, and just think about it, and then try to see how I can make sure that maybe more often I can get to this state, and then people can think about themselves, and these are not tools that everybody can have. I like the idea about individualized actually tools. So for Henrietta, maybe the main way or the main tool to feel calm and not stressed out, that she cannot give all the presents today to or this season to everybody, might be to write a small letter or to herself or to the other people that are there. For me, it might be trying to think about how I can substitute it with something else, but everybody might have different ways in which they can keep this wellness
I think
feelings.
there's a lot
Yeah.
of head-based things we're thinking about too, but
Yeah.
there's some actual physical things that you can do. You can go for a walk. You can do some yoga if you do yoga. You can just practice breathing.
de-stressing,
You
to
know,
de-stress.
de-stressing kinds of, but also it actually changes your chemistry. Did you know that if you took your fingers like this and you snap like that with both fingers 50 times, it actually changes your brain chemistry?
How so?
It changes the chemistry in the brain. It produces some of the endorphins, some of those good things that we like and talk about.
So when you talk about it changing the brain, it increases certain chemicals in the brain
Exactly.
so that we feel better.
Yep. Yoga does that. There's been research that shows that it does it. Other things are running gratitude. If you run gratitude for 8 minutes a day, which, as my husband says, isn't all that easy, if you run gratitude, it actually produces
So
different
what does
chemicals.
it mean to be in gratitude? And you say 8 minutes a day, but I'm sure one doesn't have to be in gratitude for 8 minutes at a time,
Right.
anytime throughout that day.
Yep. And just
So
sometimes
what does it mean to be in gratitude? To be thankful
I
for what
open
you
my eyes in the morning and I say, I am grateful that I can see. I'm grateful basically that I can match my socks. I mean, there are people out there who can't match their shoes for the day. They're happy to get them together.
Or those who
know.
don't even have any
Yeah,
shoes
exactly.
to match.
Yeah. Well, maybe just being able to put your foot out and stand up if you can, if you're one that can stand up. You know, gratitude for anything that you can do. Look out at the sun, you know, look at the moon, look at the stars.
So we have talked about, the word came up of control one's emotions and being in touch with one's emotions. And I'm thinking a lot of people, when you get that feeling of stress or overwhelm, might try to push those feelings away and push those feelings down. How would you tell people, first of all, that those feelings are important and how to be in touch with them? And why it's important to be in touch with them?
To take this one?
Well, when you say pushing our feelings down, don't we all try to do that? You know, some
Because they
people
might be uncomfortable and we
Yeah.
don't want to face them or
And
deal with them. And should
Yeah.
we? Should
Yeah.
we always face or deal with those
I never like
uncomfortable?
shoulds, and you know what they
Ah.
say is about shoulding yourself.
That's right. So when, rather than should, when? I won't say
think you.
should,
I
when
think
should.
starting at number one, you have to make sure that to really look at the things you're doing. Are they hurting you, or are they hurting somebody else? You know, you really need to stop and take a look at that. And you know, that's a very good place to start from. Is it hurting me to do this? Am I hurting another family member? You know, and of course, if it's physical, immediately that needs to stop. If there's anything going on like that, if you're physically hurting yourself or is somebody else a threat to you, that needs to be dealt with immediately. But aside from that, I think you were talking about writing, which I think is a wonderful activity to write down maybe what's happening to you, what are you hurting someone, or, you know, if somebody's listening to this and it's resonating with them that, yeah, I need to take a look, I think writing down is a good place to start.
So getting back to the idea of just waking up in the morning, with a Trump victory, for instance, that was depressing for people. That's not a question of, is it hurting me or is it hurting someone else? I don't think. So if you have a feeling of depression because of something that happened, let's say a fire, that it was in Oakland and you read
Yeah.
about that.
It was very, very depressing.
Yeah, what do you tell yourself? How do you deal with those feelings of sadness and depression that events outside of yourself might have on you?
Yeah, I think that it's very important to acknowledge them, and this is one of the things that it's important. And usually, it might be sadness and it might be anger, and at the end of the day, both these emotions stem from fear. Fear of the unknown, what would happen for me, real fear when the elections came.
Yes.
People are fearful what
Yes.
the future would
We heard
would
fear a
hold.
lot. I heard
Yes.
that word so many times.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, for the
That-
uncertainty, and then
Yeah.
it becomes sadness, and then it might become anger, and there was anger also after it. And I think that it's important to acknowledge it, and then to think about it at the end of the day, how you can react to something and how much control you can have. I thought that it was, for me at least, very important that after that people started to talk about healing as a community, how we can talk to each other, because what happened at the elections in many ways show a divide between people, and like the white and the black side of the dark side of the moon, if you wish, or something like that. So to see how you can first acknowledge them, and then to think about whether you can alter that, what is in your power and what is not in your power, because I think that also a lot of the fear is that you don't have control.
It seems also, I'm thinking just in listening to you say that, it's important to on some level take action.
Yeah.
And when you're having those feelings, one way of taking action is to acknowledge the feelings. And then what? Find a way to have do something positive
Yeah.
in terms of those feelings or in terms of the events?
I think you were talking about community.
Community, exactly.
I think
Yeah,
community
yeah.
is so important. I used to do a lot of family therapy, and when there was a really difficult problem, you know, people wanted to get together one-to-one with a therapist, and we did family work, and what we tried to do was when the problem is at its worst, enlarge your community, which we tend not to do. We tend to make it smaller, but try to enlarge your community, get people involved
You
with
know,
you.
I heard that word community, but if you're there by yourself,
Well, you
what
can,
practical way do you enlarge your community?
you know, the internet is great. You
So
can go
you
on
get
the
on the
internet.
internet and
Yeah, you
what?
can go. You can go send an email to a good friend, and we've all got cell phones. You can call somebody. I had a friend who was a psychiatrist, and he said if you had 3 people that you could tell your deepest thoughts to, you wouldn't need to have a therapist. He used to call therapy rent a friend. So you know, I have a few go-to people that I
So
call.
you're saying reach out.
Yeah, reach out.
Don't hold it in.
I find that if you tell your deepest innermost about 3 times, it starts to kind of loosen up for you a little bit. So if you've got a community, but writing is great. I blog, you know, and if something really bothers me, I'll put out a blog, and people are responsive to that.
You had mentioned writing in lieu of giving gifts.
Mhm.
Write a
like
nice
that.
note to
Write
people.
a nice note to people. But I know that, for example, there is one real simple thing that is called the 5-minute journal that actually my son, who is millennial, told me about, and I start using it. It basically is you don't need to write, because a lot of people will say, "Oh, but I don't know how to write. And why I should write so much long and stuff like that." But it has a very simple things, a nice quote, but then you get into the habit to start with gratefulness. So you write 3 things that you're grateful about
I like that, yeah.
this day, and then you put the intention for the day, and it is like simple sentences, but you get in the habit to get also in touch with your emotions for the day, and it's very simple.
So it sounds like you start that first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
Maybe just as you step out of bed or as you're getting up out of bed. I'm
having your
thankful I
coffee,
can
right?
get up out of
Yeah.
bed this
I'm glad I can
morning.
open my eyes if you haven't even moved yet.
Because
Yeah.
this changes the chemistry. You cannot be grateful at the same time and to be anxious. Try to think about some anxious moment about that you're very anxious or very stressed about, and at the same time think about 3 things that you're thankful about. It cannot.
You can't do-
You can't do
yes.
both, and so the chemistry changes. Your attention cannot be. So this is the fastest moment in which you can just change a little bit.
And you
your
know, one of
negative
the
emotions.
greatest changes for you is laughter too. I mean, laughter brings in air, you know, and so sometimes we say run a funny movie or watch the cat flushing the toilet on YouTube.
Or putting all the paper in it.
Exactly. You know, find something that makes you laugh. So that can be really helpful. But one thing I want to say about holidays and events, my mother said, this too shall pass. Now that sounds like an inane thing, but the reality is we find that people are sometimes more stressed about an upcoming holiday event or whatever than the actual event is not as bad as that anticipation. And just knowing that and saying to yourself now, you know, I'm going to be okay, you know, trying to settle yourself like babies do. And another technique you can do, by the way, is you can put your arms like this and you can rock.
Yes.
And the mind somehow does not know. I mean, it really accepts that as, and touch, of course, hugging everybody and all
Yes.
that is a wonderful thing to do.
So when you said this too shall pass, you talked about it in terms of upcoming events. And I find it's also good for events that you're in or that have happened, like the election. Well, this too shall pass. I mean, it will be okay. We'll have 4 more years, and things
Exactly.
will change, and whatever has happened,
And it scares kids
this
too.
too will pass.
Yeah, and it scares kids, smaller kids, you know, when they hear us say, you know, like after 9/11, I did some work with families, and one of the things was the world will never be the same. You know, the world is over. And, you know, and it wasn't over. I mean, New York came back, you know, and
Life
you know,
is
life.
ongoing.
Yeah.
And I guess that's another thing. Life is ongoing.
Yeah.
What I find in terms of watching one's feelings, and I find for myself when I'm going down, I call it the rabbit hole, watching one's thoughts and saying, you don't want to go. You know, if you continue thinking along those lines where it's going to lead you. So do you want to go there or do you want to think of something else?
Yeah. Choices.
Yes.
I think that again, if we talk about awareness, and if you know that there were things that helped you before, you might think about, oh, I like there is a one technique, again, it's technique, but where people can go through their, they make a pyramid of feelings, because very often we think really it is either white or black. I'm in the darkness. There is no light in the tunnel, none, whatever. And so and it is, this is a technique not created by psychologists, by people that were depressed, and this was one of her tools that she deals with really dark feelings in the morning. So she makes this triangle, and then she thinks about what is behind this emotion in the moment. What you were saying about this rabbit hole. What is behind? And then I'm sad because, and trying to feel about what it might be. And then she draws it in a certain kind of color, but and continue to the moment when she realized that behind this sadness there are at least 4 or 5 emotions. It's not one. It might be fear. Why I'm sad about the holidays? Maybe because I'm alone. Maybe because most of my family, for example, is far away. That's why maybe I'm sad. So I feel lonely. Then certain other things. So naming these things can help to unravel. And then for every one of them to think about moments in life where you find ways to deal with this particular emotion. Because this big block of sadness then becomes something more tangible. So, okay, I feel lonely because my family is away. So let me think how I dealt before over these years where we're here. I would call them, I will send a huge amount of goodies, which would cost me more, the packaging would cost me more than the goodies, but it makes me feel good, or I would write nice letter, or whatever it is, but I write how I dealt with it. And this restores, not only I get aware of the emotion, but also how to deal with it.
What you're reminding me of, usually, I think, and you'll forgive my usually, people who might feel depressed, feel hopeless, feel powerless. And what you're saying is that we don't have to feel that way, that we can be in control, that we can determine how we feel. It's a matter of what we choose to think about, that we have a choice in what we think about. So therefore, we're not powerless.
Right.
So what do you say to somebody? I talked earlier about the calls coming into the crisis hotlines. What do you say to somebody who's depressed or who's suicidal, who's calling?
I come from the Mental Health Association of San Francisco. Most of our the people that give help are people that went through the same depression or anxiety. So the main thing is for people to know that they're not alone, and what they're feeling is not only them, but there's a lot of other people that feel the same sadness or similar sadness or depression, and that there is hope out there because there is a community and they can find a way or reach for help in this dark moment. Darkness is part of our human condition. It is. I think that it's a false idea that we should be always happy.
So what you're saying, it's okay for you to feel down. It's
Yeah.
okay for you to feel depressed.
Yeah.
What is not okay is if you stay there,
Yeah.
that you can pull yourself up.
Yeah.
You can help yourself.
Yeah.
Do you deal with people in terms of bereavement who would call you and reach out to you to tell you that they want to go with the person that they lost?
Yeah.
And there's no reason for them to continue living.
One of the really normal things, and I want to normalize it, is to say that you wish that you were with the person who had died. That's very normal. But saying that I want to join that person, I have a plan, is not normal. And so there's a difference. And the reason I say that is because a lot of people sometimes get overly concerned because someone says, I wish I was with my son Scott, who was killed many years ago. And that's a normal reaction. But saying, I'm planning on being with him, there's a huge difference between those two kinds of things. And you were talking about the suicide hotline. I'll have to say that the one thing you want to make sure during this holiday season, if you've got somebody who you think might be suicidal, you need to ask them if they are, and and you need to explore that and see if they have a way to do it, and you need to get them help.
Do people usually admit that they're suicidal?
Yes, they do. If you will approach them directly and ask them directly, if they have been thinking about it, they will tell you.
What would make you think? Can we talk about some of the signs that would make someone... Because I'm thinking a lot of people might think that, first of all, that's invasive. To be so bold. We have space. And that's invading somebody's space to ask them something so personal. So at what point should one feel free to ask someone a question like that?
You know what? I'm willing to take the fallout. I'm
But
willing to ask somebody.
Okay,
some of the signs would be that they're staying in bed all day, that they're feeling hopeless, helpless, that they're not taking care of their hygiene. You can do the smell test. That they are just generally feeling worthless, and that they're not doing any of their daily activities. If you've got a person in your life who's not doing any of the things that they used to do, they're giving up on things, then you worry about them. But also there's another tricky side, which is so painful to those who have had a suicide, and that is that sometimes people look better right before because they now have a plan. They look like they've improved. You watch for them to start giving their items away. That's a cue that they're giving their special things away to certain people. And as I say, they may act happier because they suddenly have a plan and a decision.
So how do you then? Now, it is tricky because a tip-off, as you said, is when someone's not acting normally. And you have to be in there. I mean, you have to know them to know what's normal for them and not. It's not just a stranger. So you're familiar with their behavior, and the person isn't acting the way they would normally act. So you know something's wrong. But then if they're getting better, let us say you don't know that they're giving their things away, but they're getting better, or they seem to be acting better, how then would you suspect that what you see is not necessarily what is?
You got it.
Yeah, no, I think that there is one interesting fact, actually, that a lot of people, before they would attempt to commit to die of suicide, are going to their primary care physician. 50% of the time they go to their primary care physician inside, and we have a lot of support groups of people that were survivors of attempt of suicide or attempt survivors or people, and they all would tell you that if somebody would reach to them at this moment, this is what they needed. So in a way, they go to the healthcare provider because they're subconsciously wanting somebody to reach to them. So I think in general, if we try to give support, create support system around people, this really might help.
They don't tell their cares provider exactly. Usually they would say something physical. Or are you talking about a mental therapist?
No. They go to their physician, to the primary care physician, and that's why now there is a big push so that the primary care physicians would get trained to get some of the signs.
But when they go to that primary physician, they don't talk about a mental problem.
No.
They would talk about a physical problem.
Yeah.
So how would a primary care physician know that there's a mental problem instead of just a physical problem?
The idea is that it is much more safer. This is now a public health issue, so they want to train physicians to screen them the same way that they might screen them for risk for diabetes or something else.
So
that
you're
they would,
saying they're training primary care physicians to
screen,
ask
yeah,
to ask
questions,
about,
or yeah, or to give them a questionnaire which might ask how often you've had these thoughts or something like that.
So I would think
Yeah.
sometimes if someone is suicidal, you know, someone who stops his car and just jumps off the bridge, when you're at a point where you're going to do away with yourself, you don't really care.
No,
And
most of the people that I know would tell you that they really care.
they do care,
Yeah.
but they care enough to seek help.
Yeah,
Most
they would
people
say
care
that if there was
enough to
somebody,
seek help.
at least this is what I know from the people that are sharing their stories around suicide, that they really deep inside would have loved to have somebody
Yeah.
at the bridge. And there is Kevin Hines is a very famous author that is on our board, and he jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge, and it's one of the survivors, which was incredible. And he would tell you that right when he
On the
jumped,
way to,
Oh,
he
yes.
really the first
Yes,
minute
he knew it was a
really-
mistake.
It was a mistake.
Yeah.
So I think that's why, if we think about it in general, this might be the way to think about that. You will be safe maybe to ask person how they feel, even if you don't know completely. Having the support of the community around you would be the one.
Well, we're talking about surviving the holidays, those dreary days. Oh,
Wow. Why they're so
not,
dreary?
not the dreary days of the holidays, but just dreary days that seem to come into our lives.
Yeah.
And you said something that was quite fascinating, that darkness is a part of life,
Oh yeah.
that we cannot expect to have joy all the time.
well, if we didn't know what sorrow was, we wouldn't know what happiness was. It's the continuum.
Yes, and if you didn't know what light was, you wouldn't be able to realize what darkness is all about. So, at what point, how do you deal with the darkness in saying, this is okay, what I'm feeling is okay, I don't have to push myself out of it? I mean, at what point do you say, it's okay, I don't have to find ways of getting out of it, I can just, do you
I think
stay
that you
in
need
it?
to stay in it to the point in which, so that you can be aware of what is happening with you. Because otherwise, if you deny it, you might go in another direction. For example, you might the what you're saying about stuffing your feelings or isolating yourself and stuff like that. So I think it's important to stay with it, but also to work on the feeling. It might sound rational, but really to try to find out why I'm feeling sad. That's exactly what we were talking about. What is behind that? Why I'm feeling so down? What is triggering me? What triggers me this particular holiday season that I feel so crappy? Is it because I need to face my family? Is it because I need to have a lot of, yeah, so.
So it's okay to feel the sadness, the depression, the darkness. What's not okay is to stay in it for any length of time.
Yeah, without reaching
Out.
out.
Well, it's,
or
yeah,
in.
when you can't get out of it, you know,
Yeah.
you really need to reach out for help to help you out of it. If you really, I mean, sometimes people are so down they just can't move out of it. But don't forget, there's also something called an agitated depression. Not everybody who's depressed is in bed. Some people are out running around frenetically, and they have an agitated depression.
So if you're out running around frenetically, I mean, that's not what a lot of people, I won't say most people because I haven't talked to a lot of people on the subject. I haven't conducted any polls to find out what we think when we think of depression. We think of someone who's inactive, maybe, rather than somebody who's running around frenetically. So when you talk about someone running around frenetically, what's a depression?
What does it look like? Well,
I mean, that's very energetic.
I'll have to talk about, I have to talk about myself.
As if somebody was on amphetamines or something.
After my son was killed in an automobile accident, I was very frenetic. I was very agitated. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I did lots of activities. I looked like I was functional, but I was really depressed. And I
was
was
this
moving out, working all the time, so I didn't have to deal with the depression.
was that helpful?
Um,
Keeping active, keeping involved.
I think at the time, if someone, no, I was overly agitated. One thing that happens when you get that agitated is you become really, really brittle, and you become maybe even really productive at work and all that kind of, at least you think you are. And really you need to stop, take a break, and and because you can have a breakdown from that,
So
and that's
what
a depression.
made you realize what was going on with your agitated depression? What made you stop? I would think if one
I think
is
just
that
frankly,
agitated, you would just wear yourself down.
frankly, with the grief and loss, I think that eventually do get worn down, and eventually I had to quit my job, and I went back to school as a way, because I was working with a lot of bereaved people at the time in a hospital, and I went to another job because I finally couldn't do it anymore. But that took about a year, so there's a time factor that can
So
happen too.
at what point did you realize that what you were doing was a result of your son's death and you needed to step back?
I think that I just realized I couldn't do it anymore.
What you were
one
doing.
day I just said, enough. I can't. I'm going to quit my job and go back to school.
Sometimes I think when a crisis like that hits, people are told not to make those sudden changes,
Mm-hmm.
not to sell the house,
Yeah.
not to move away.
Yeah.
that-
Particularly during my advice had been, because I worked in a hospital with families who had a loss. I was a psychiatric nursing consultant to the surgical service at the University of Rochester when my son was killed. And one of the things that I had told everybody, and that I thought myself, was you got to stay doing what you're doing for a year. Don't move, don't make any decisions, do your Christmas exactly the same way, do everything exactly the same way for a year. And that's what I did. And that's, at the end of the year, I said, okay, I've done it enough. I'm not going to do, another year through it. So, whether that's right or wrong, whether that works for people, now I believe that everybody has their own path, and you have to do it the way you do it. But I always say to people, you know what, if you don't celebrate Christmas that first year, you're going to have to open the ornaments the second year, and it's not any easier, or the third year, or whatever. Maybe ornaments are a metaphor for your life. If you don't open whatever, and go to the places you've been to before and seen the people, you're going to have to do it someday.
I think there is a natural, if anything is natural, process that one goes through. For example, I know when I've had, my mother die, there was a point where looking at the pictures made me cry. So I finally one day turned all the pictures around so I couldn't see. And then I knew there was a day when I could turn those pictures back around and it was all right. So what are the natural processes, for example, the realization that darkness is a part of our lives, it's not something that we can escape, those feelings of fear, listening to our inner feelings. What are the natural processes that we've talked about, some of them, that help us go through this cycle of joy and despair and back again?
I guess in a way what your mom told you, it shall pass. I think that in a way, that's why it's so hard, especially for younger kids, when there is a grieving process, with these suicides here in Palo Alto and all this. It was scary because for the first time but then I think that over the life, and of course parents can help in family, but you create this point of reference and you say, yeah, I was so sad, but I know that I would go on the other side. And this is the way that I went through it. So you have a point of reference and a hope that this would change. So the same way that you were talking about the pictures of your mom, my father died really around the holidays. Every year it is really very hard. but it's again thinking that you keep your memories, and it's about family, and look at the other side, and it would take time. It will take
Yes,
time.
it takes
Yeah.
time. I mean,
Yeah.
there is a point, I too have lost a child, and there's a point where you really don't care. You know, where you say, this too will pass. You're in a state where telling you it will pass in a way doesn't help. You know it'll pass, but
It
that
doesn't. Yeah.
it, there are things you know you can't rush.
Right.
And there's
Exactly.
a point where you don't care whether it passes or not. You're just in that state of sadness or in the depths of despair
Yeah.
where it doesn't really matter. And then there is a point where it gets better.
Yeah. It's a healing. I think that we need to believe in the way that our physical pain and our physical, we have the strength in our bodies so that they would heal. Our psyche is also, in general, very resilient and strong, and it would heal. For different people, it would be a different way and different timing. For some people, one type of medication would help, for others, but we have this inner strength that.
Does it help? I think it might help if you think that life is purposeful.
Yeah.
And there's a purpose in it. If there's no purpose in it and it's just random, then it makes no sense and it's not worth it.
Remember Viktor Frankl's
yes.
book, Man's Search for Meaning? He said, if you have a why, you can find anyhow.
Yes. We
You
have
will
a
find
video,
how.
and I would be remiss right now to let our show pass without seeing at least some of the video that we have. So why don't we maybe continue talking until,
You
here
don't
we
need
go.
enough hope to get through the day. You don't need enough hope to get through a year. You just need enough hope to get through the next moment.
Even though we had this thing happen to us, it also happened for us.
We hold the memories of those that we cared for, that were a part in the making of our characters. And when they pass, those memories will come back when you need them. They become voices of intuition and of guidance.
We want to be a lifeline for somebody else. We want to inspire others and say, we know what it's like to be where you are, but you're not always going to be there. Just take our hand, believe us. We'll take the journey with you.
When life presents 1,000 reasons to mourn, show life that you have 1,001 reasons to smile.
We get through this one breath at a time. We don't do it a day at a time. That's healing. That's positive, and that's what the world wants to talk about.
People die. Love doesn't die.
We always say, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours.
Well, I love those flowers. What would you like to share that we haven't mentioned that you think is important to talk about? You had mentioned 5 A's. Remember?
Four A's.
4 A's. I'm sure there's a fifth
yeah,
someplace, but we'll deal with
no, but
the
it was
4.
about the stress, but I was also really thinking about this, going back to these wellness tools. I think that it would happen very on a practical level. I think for people, it's really important to look at what triggers them, what triggers their anxiety in this holiday season. And as I said, look at that and then create a specific action plan how you would address this. So as I said, a lot of people usually get really anxious about the holidays because of the fact that they would maybe go and meet their families. We talk about loss, but we know people that are dreading their living families. Because,
Yes, that family celebration.
Because they need to go and address some dysfunctionality there or whatever it is. And then again, think about, is it avoidable and unavoidable? If it is unavoidable to go and meet with your people or parents or whoever, your siblings, very often siblings also can trigger you in big ways. Think about what exactly triggers you in this situation so that you can be prepared. Think about what I can do, how I can prepare in any way would I write or go for a walk when after the dinner table, or should I?
And tell people that
yeah.
if you leave the table, they don't have to come and get you, that you may need a moment.
A moment.
Well,
yeah,
I was
yeah,
thinking, first of all, give yourself permission not to go.
I guess so, but if you
Tell them
that's why I
early,
said,
though. Tell them early because they'll be mad at you.
Now,
and they'll
is
be
that
mad at you anyway.
avoidance? I mean, is that
yeah.
a healthy avoidance?
I think that this is a healthy one. So when we talk about the 4A's, the first one is avoid the stress, to see whether you could avoid it or not. So create if it is possible, avoid toxic people. This would be the first one that you can say. The next one would be, if you cannot avoid it, alter your way of reacting to it. This is the second A, alter. So if grandma always, or I'm making it up, of course, but if your sister always gets you on your nerves, just try to think about it. Should you be always agitated in the same way now that you're mature individuals, because we very often regress and go to this moment. So try to alter as much as possible the way that you can react to it, or try to find other people, have your safe lines, for example, tell your friends, I would call you because I'm meeting my family, so be on the line, because chances are that in the evening I would be extremely stressed out. So this was one that can be a way that. Then the other one is to accept. That you should accept that stress, and I mentioned about the darkness, but to accept that life is not easy. I think that especially lately in Silicon Valley, and I really am very happy about this culture of where people are creating these campuses of startups where you have yoga, you have coaches, you have food, you have healthy, and you should be happy. You should be happy all the time. There is no space, because everything is there. Why you should be? And I should tell you that there are people that are really saying that they don't feel the permission to be sad or depressed in this situation, because you should be all the time happy. We should go and be happy all the time. And I think
Don't
that this
worry,
is,
be happy,
Yeah,
right?
no worry, be happy. And I think that
So what happens when people find out that they have all of these reasons to be happy? They have the yoga, they have the food, they have their jobs, and they feel that something's missing. What do you do when you have everything you should be grateful for, and yet there is something you feel inside that's missing?
Well, I think if it's a family member that you're missing, if we want to take a look at that, and then honor them this holiday. Give a toast. Have a family member, if you don't want to do it, give a toast to the person who's missing. Here's to my mother. And if you do it for a child, here's to my child who died, but also to my living children. It's very important that you acknowledge everyone. You can make wreaths and put special things from your family member on the wreaths. You can have people bring their food that they loved. You can bake grandma's pie. You can make your mother's salad, whatever. You can do things and let people know that you're honoring them.
That's if there's something very, very concrete, like a person who has passed on. But if it's something more intangible, if it's just a feeling of emptiness, how do you deal with that?
you stay with it.
You stay with it.
You stay with it because, as I mentioned, maybe it's something that is telling you that you miss, that you would strive to get it further in life. So I think that it's so important for us to acknowledge all the spectrum of the emotions in our life.
Not run away from them. Not run away from them. Not think there's something wrong with that feeling of emptiness.
Yeah, because maybe this emptiness is something that is empty because you wish to have something else, and it's never, you might, attaining a goal doesn't make you happy. It's the journey that makes you happy.
Yes, but then there is the guilt that people can feel, that I have all of this.
There's something called longing for the unavailable too. There are some people who enjoy the cello music and the tragedy and the longing for the unavailable. There's some enjoyment in that. So maybe you need to be with that And some people need to be with it until they decide that they want to move on to something else.
So what you're saying is maybe we should be with whatever it is that's in our lives. To say, this is what is at this particular moment. What can I get out of it?
Yeah.
For my own growth and development.
Yeah, and that 4A actually is adapt. And it is about the idea that we should think about changing our expectations very often. Because maybe we are creating this stress in our life is because we have maybe not realistic expectations at the moment. You can achieve pretty much everything, but not at the same moment. We usually don't come with the right idea about that.
And some things aren't worthy of achieving.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And those expectations are sometimes outside expectations that we've absorbed and taken on as our own.
Yeah.
When we should let them go. How do we know when something is ours and when it's something we've taken upon ourselves?
Well, I think that you do. I think, again, writing, making a list of things that you want for yourself, and taking a look at what may be expectations of others. I mean, you can have, you know, two things that you look at. I think it's analyzing yourself, respecting yourself, and loving yourself enough to take a look. I mean, you're worth it. You're worth it. This is your life. This is my life. This is your life. It's the only one we've got. We're really worth it.
Thank you so much for being here to tell us that we're worth it. Our lives are worth it. We're not victims. That we can have some control, that what we think and what we do can make a difference in our lives for the better. So thank you for sharing. I'd certainly like to thank our viewers for watching. Until next time.